What is up, Flick fans, and welcome back to my channel. I am back with a brand new ranking. Today, I am ranking all 19 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies from least favorite to most favorite. Now, if you guys have seen this video before, I do this every time a new Marvel movie comes out. I did it after Black Panther. My rankings have changed a little bit, though, so this list will be a tad bit different. I'm going to try to go through the movies a little bit quicker since I've done this before. Now that we have Infinity War, I have a brand new movie to add to this list. So this ranking kind of goes like this. I rank these not which one I think is the strongest film. It is which ones are my personal favorites. What Marvel movie do I want to watch over and over? I account script, I account characters, and the filmmaking in general, but making a list is always so subjective, so you guys are definitely going to have a different list than me. But the most important part about this video, the reason why I'm doing it, is I want to see your lists. I'm a huge fan of lists, so please comment what your thoughts are below. What's your most favorite? What's your least favorite? Jeez, I can't believe there's already 19 movies in the MCU. And Austin, I knew you were going to put Iron Man 2 at number 19. Well, guess what? Nothing has changed in that regard. I still think this movie is moderately rewatchable, and there are moments in there as there are in every MCU movie. But other than Sam Rockwell as Justin Hammer, some decent action scenes, and another great story arc for Tony Stark, everything else in this movie just feels kind of jumbled. It feels like they were trying to set up the next Avengers film a little bit too much, something that I think some of the Marvel movies had to learn from. But overall, Iron Man 2, it's fine. It's just not really good. Next up is the sequel to Thor, and that is Thor: The Dark World, a film that I liked a lot more on my first watch when I saw it in a theater because of the spectacle and scale and the way that Asgard looks. But the more I watch it, the more I realize that the mix of humor and emotional tones just do not come together to create a super cohesive film, and that's my biggest problem with Thor: The Dark World. It just feels really jumbled. Oh, and the villain, you can go check out my MCU villains ranking video, but yeah, not good. My first example of me flip-flopping since February, I actually have The Incredible Hulk up next. It was a little higher on this list, but I went back and I rewatched it, and I still like the movie. I still think it's a decent film. It just didn't have as many moments as the film that is next on this list. I actually do think Edward Norton gives a decent performance. It's kind of jarring to go back and watch him when you're thinking of Mark Ruffalo, but the movie just struggles at times trying to find its footing, and there's not too many things that are memorable other than the abomination scene at the end. I've always thought that was really cool. Iron Man 3, yeah, we're at number 16, and we've already covered 2 of the Iron Man films, and that's not a detrimental thing to Tony Stark or Robert Downey Jr. I just think his movies are a little bit weaker than I want them to be. And in my opinion, Iron Man 3 makes some mistakes with its characters, and the third act really falls off the rails for me. I love the Mandarin in the first half of the film. I wasn't really on board with the twist at the time. I think it's okay in terms of, once again, a Shane Black movie, but on my MCU ranking list, it is number 16. Gosh, it seems low, it really does, but I genuinely like this film. It's Avengers: Age of Ultron. Now, the first time I saw this in theaters, I was so hyped up. I walked out like, yeah, that was great. I feel like something was missing. But was it great? And the more I watch it, I realize I don't think it's great. I really don't. I think it's good, but I do feel like it's missing something in there. I think Ultron could have been better, even though I think he was okay. Some of the characters really don't get their due. Quicksilver goes out a tad bit too fast for me, and there's just some things that don't work about the story. Overall, I think it's fun, but it's just too much of a rehash of the first Avengers for me. Yes, I was absolutely higher on this movie when it first came out. Just a tad bit. I haven't faltered too much, but Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, my problem with it is the more I watch it, the more I have an issue with the humor. And while I love Drax as a character, I just feel like there's a big missed opportunity there. He's supposed to be this warrior, and he's never really had that warrior's mentality. They've kind of turned him into a dope, and while I think he's hilarious, one of the funniest characters, and every time he's on screen, I want more of him, I just feel like that's a prime example of what Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 did. It had missed opportunities with multiple characters. I do think it was a fun ride, and that emotional payoff at the end with Yondu, gosh, guys, I think about that, and I still get teary-eyed. Up next is Thor! And think the first Thor is a good movie. I really do. I have more of an issue when they go to Earth, kind of like I do in The Dark World. That being said, how they made Thor relatable and stripped him of his powers, I love that story aspect. I think the beginning of the dynamic between him and Loki is great. I love seeing the Warriors 3, Lady Sif. It's the Asgard that I kind of fell in love with, and I think what Kenneth Branagh did with that universe, starting and out, getting us off on the right foot. The first Thor is a solid film. Now I have Doctor Strange, and once again, I cannot believe it's number 12 because I think this is the first movie on my list that I'm closer to great than good because Doctor Strange, what it did, and I actually think this movie is a tad bit better than the next one on my list. I just think the next one is a little bit more rewatchable. Because let's be flat honest, it's hard to watch the beginning of this movie when he gets in the wreck and when the bad things are happening to him trying to come back from his injuries. It's hard to watch, but it's very heartfelt and emotional. I don't think Caecilius makes for a good villain, but I love the third act and the way that he takes out Dormammu. And even though Benedict Cumberbatch is kind of a douchebag, you really feel for his character later on, and that's important. This is number 11 for one reason only, and that is the rewatchability factor, because I do find this as one of the funniest movies in the MCU, and that's Ant-Man. I genuinely think Paul Rudd is great as his character. Sure, he's not the most powerful, and he doesn't have the most to do in a movie like Civil War, but he comes in, he makes his impact, and he leaves, and I think that's what you can ask from a character like Ant-Man. And then you add the supporting cast. You've got Michael Douglas and Evangeline Lilly. I mean, my goodness, and they bring everything they have to a story that's a little bit more emotional than I expected. A third act that is genuinely entertaining. It doesn't have the meat that some of the other Marvel films give you, but I love a small-scaled story every now and then, and Ant-Man was very refreshing. This is the one that I think a lot of people are going to see and complain about, but you know what? I can't. This is my personal list. I have to be honest with you guys, and that is Captain America: The First Avenger. A lot of people have problems with this movie because they think it's a little choppy, and they have a problem with Steve Rogers as a skinny dude with the big head. And I get it. I understand that that's problematic for some people, but this story just sucked me in from the first scene, and from there on out, yes, I have an issue with the montage. It skips over a lot of things, and the end battle wasn't the most climactic battle I've ever seen, but the build-up and the payoff and what he does flying that jet into the eyes, every time I watch it, I get emotional. I think Haley Atwell is awesome. We've got some great supporting characters in there, and it really leads in to what made Captain America my favorite on-screen superhero of all time. Spoilers for my MCU hero countdown list. But before Captain America was my favorite hero, I grew up just loving Spider-Man, and when they replaced, well, Tobey Maguire, but then when they replaced Andrew Garfield, I'm like, okay, and not that those guys were the best ever, but I really just, the constant recasting of a character kind of got under my skin until I saw Tom Holland and what he brings to that character, not just in Civil War, but in a movie like Spider-Man Homecoming that combines aspects from so many, and everybody says it, John Hughes films like a Ferris Bueller or a Breakfast Club, and then gives you that with the superhero elements that you know and love. The only thing that I was missing from this movie was a great action scene with Spider-Man, but we get that in Avengers Infinity War, so. Oh, and Michael Keaton as the Vulture just added to what was already a fun film. Another example of how I constantly flip-flop, I actually had Spider-Man above Thor Ragnarok for a while, but after watching them both at least 5 times, and nothing wrong with Spider-Man, this takes nothing away from that film, but Thor Ragnarok is so daggone fun. Do you guys ever just get on YouTube and Google Thor Ragnarok end fight scene? You know, that last 4 minutes when it's him and the Hulk and Valkyrie and Loki just taking everybody out, and he's using the lightning, and guys, that is just such a good, the way that they incorporate music, like Guardians of the Galaxy did, but for me, it's just a whole nother level of epic because you have the God of Thunder taking all of these people out, and then Hela makes for a great villain. You have Taika Waititi's sense of humor. A lot of people have an issue with the inconsistent tones of this film, but I don't find it inconsistent. I think the epic balance with the humor works perfectly, and I think Thor Ragnarok is an awesome movie. And I keep wanting to put Thor Ragnarok over this film, but every time I think about the first Iron Man, I can't do it because it was so important. Not just, okay, it's an important film, it's the first one in the universe, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter if it's the first one. It just matters if it's a good one. And to me, it's a genuinely great film. It's one of the most grounded movies in the Marvel Universe, and that's not saying much because it was the first, and it's before they really had all of these grand plans, but Robert Downey Jr.'s casting, and I say this all the time, ask Tony Stark, is one of the best castings of all time, you add in talented cast members like a Gwyneth Paltrow or a Jeff Bridges as a decent villain, you've got a good movie, and you've got something that started an entire universe, and it's the reason I'm doing this list. I don't know if I did that right. Okay, Wakanda Forever, Black Panther. What can I say about this movie that hasn't been said this year? It's been the topic of conversation, and yes, it made a ton of money, but this thing is, I just hit my microphone. This thing is so epic, you guys. Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther is still one of the coolest, not the best, the coolest and most just BA castings I have ever seen in my life. Then a director like Ryan Coogler takes on this film, brings in some incredible action, a beautiful look to it. I think the cinematography here is gorgeous. I have a few issues with the CGI, but when you're getting super comic booky and nerdy, it doesn't bother me too much. I think Black Panther is epic, and Killmonger is still one of the coolest villains. Oh, M'Baku also. My God, M'Baku is great. I am personally, I'm shocked seeing Guardians of the Galaxy at number 5, guys, because the first time I watched Guardians of the Galaxy, I walked out and said, well, that was unexpected. Peter Quill, Gamora, Drax, Rocket, and Groot. You've got an epic pairing. You see how they all come together and form this epic team. I don't think the villain was the strongest, but the fact that the team itself and everything else about this movie, especially incorporating the music, can overshadow a weak villain like that and give us something that was completely mind-blowing at the time. I just think this is one of the coolest superhero movies I have ever seen and the closest thing to Star Wars that Marvel or any superhero movie has ever done. Ladies and gentlemen, it has yet to be talked about on this list, but we are finally here. We have arrived at Avengers Infinity War. And like I say, these lists are not set in stone. I've watched the movie one time, for goodness sakes. I'm going back to watch it again tomorrow morning, so who knows, my thoughts may drastically change. But right now, I absolutely love this movie. And the more I think about it, the more I want to go back and watch it. It's kind of that same feeling I had when I watched the first Avengers. I just kept wanting to rewatch it. But the difference between the first Avengers and this one is that this one, I think, is a little bit more cluttered. Duh, Austin, you have all these characters, and that's not necessarily a complaint. I'm just giving you a factual statement. There's a lot of characters in here to balance, but the fact that they did it, they pulled it off, and I think this one has some of the most gorgeous cinematography I've ever seen in a superhero film, and the action is just mind-blowingly good. But the most important thing I have to say, and I'm going to leave you with this with no spoilers, is this is one of the most ambitious endings, and I'll talk about it a little bit more tomorrow when I do my spoiler review. I have not stopped thinking about the ending. I have to go back and watch it as soon as possible because, guys, what they did here, and you'll know it when you see it, my goodness, that's why it's so high on my list. I have this topping Infinity War right now, not because I think the cinematography is better or the filmmaking is better, because honestly, I think Infinity War tops it in that respect, but just seeing these characters come together for the first time in the very first Avengers, it's still to this day my favorite experience in a theater of all time. And just that beginning spark of their relationships, getting that dialogue that you know and love from these characters today for the first time, and the way that this was handled, Joss Whedon's writing, I think, was incredible in this film. And then you got one of the most epic and climactic third act battles that I've ever seen in a superhero film. Like I said, I think Infinity War is a little bit more epic and a little bit more climactic, but right now, after seeing this movie at least 25 times and seeing Infinity War once, I have to put the first Avengers above that, but tune in after Ant-Man and the Wasp because that might change. But a film that I think stands alone. It's great filmmaking. It's a genre of superhero movies that I don't think we had seen prior or since. It's a spy espionage thriller starring Captain America, and that is Captain America the Winter Soldier. Guys, I love this movie. I love it. I've watched it at least 25, 30 times. And I know it sounds crazy, but every time I watch it, I get something new out of it. The characters, the way that they interact, Captain America seeing Winter Soldier for the first time, the fight choreography. Can we talk about the people behind the scenes that plan this stuff? The stuntmen that stand in for Sebastian Stan and Chris Evans. My gosh, those guys are just the best. And there are just 3 or 4 fights in here that I think is some of the best hand-to-hand combat I've ever seen in a superhero movie. I don't ever think I'm going to see anything like it again. And something that nobody ever talks about, that subtle song that's playing at the end, it goes, "Yes, I know, baby." And you're just sitting there and you're seeing all these characters do their things, and Nick Fury's taking off his eye patch. It's just one of the coolest scenes to me, and it's why Winter Soldier still resonates with me to this day. And finally, the fact that we have come to a movie that could ever so slightly edge out Winter Soldier. Get on Letterboxd and go look at my scores because they're literally the exact same score, but I just can't help but to put Civil War just a tad bit higher because I think Civil War does the best job of any superhero film I have ever seen of balancing all of these characters and still giving us a story that we can sink our teeth into. We can follow it easily from beginning to end. It wasn't cluttered. It wasn't stuffed. It wasn't chock full of too many things. And sure, some people might believe that it is, but it's my opinion. It's my list, and I do believe that Civil War is just a great example of filmmaking. But then you add in the epic fight scenes, the airport battle, which is still one of the most monumental things I've ever seen. That's the fun one, right? And then you get the emotional one with Iron Man, Captain America, and Bucky at the end. And yes, a lot of people have issues with Zemo's plan, and I get that. It was a little bit convenient, but if you want to hear my thoughts on that, go check out my villains ranked list, and I give you a little taste of how I feel about that subject. But overall, great fun, great balance, great cast, great cinematography, great filmmaking. I think Captain America Civil War right now is just barely topping Winter Soldier, but you might ask me on a different day and I might give you a different answer. Yes, I'm pretty inconsistent, but that's what makes me awesome. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Like I said, go check out my other Avengers videos this week. Most importantly, my review, but tomorrow I've got a big old spoiler-filled talk review coming out for you guys. I am so excited to just kind of dive in for about 15 minutes and really talk some spoilers. If you guys haven't checked out MovieBabbleReviews.com, please go check out that website. They have some awesome articles, some Marvel rankings, some different videos covering superhero films, and every now and then you'll see my big head pop up. You guys are the absolute best, and I will catch you very soon.